Hey, do you, and this is a very personal question, but do you know anybody who was beaten up last night? Woman who was abused, threatened? Yes, you do. Maybe you didn't know that that happened last night, or maybe you were the one that was threatened or beaten. This next segment is about you. And it's about Connie Phillips and her work with the Sojourner Center. For that, we all are indebted. And it's about Carole Bartholomeaux. And Carole, you know what? You're one of those people that I think I was talking about just now, and that is, I've known you for 167 years. And yet, this is the first time you and I have ever talked about when you were a victim, and not just the public relations person, not the successful businesswoman. I want you to tell your story before we start talking about the Sojourner Center.
Well, very briefly, I was married, and I weighed 92 pounds, and my husband weighed 250 pounds, and so it wasn't really ever a fair fight. And at one point, it became so dangerous. The abuse was so dangerous, the kicking and the punching, and I had hair down to the middle of my back, and it was a real good way to keep me in line. And so I left, you know, being a good little Italian Catholic. I went and moved with my parents. I didn't file for divorce because I felt that, you know, I shouldn't do that.
After how many years?
We were married just over 2 years when I left.
And that had been going on for the 2 years?
No, the abuse started probably 9 months before I left.
Why?
I was watching the Democratic National Convention on television, and my husband came in late from work, and I wasn't even paying attention to the time. It was 2:30 in the morning. I should have known he wasn't working. And I said, oh, you can't believe what these Democrats are doing. It was when Jesse Jackson was taking over the Chicago delegation. At any rate, he walked in, slammed the TV off, walked across the room, and backhanded me. And after I got up off the floor, we only had one entrance into the apartment, and he was blocking the door. So I ran into our bedroom. He came after me. I ran across the bed. I was halfway across the living room, going for the door to get out the door, when he grabbed me by my hair, threw me down,
Had he
and
been
started
drinking?
kicking. I don't remember smelling alcohol in his breath, and I found out later that he'd been with another woman, and he thought that I somehow knew, and that's why I was waiting
But
up.
it continued.
But it continued, yeah. I left that night. He broke my glasses, and I left that night driving like Mr. Magoo down the street to actually my brother-in-law's house. And so...
Didn't he follow you?
No, because I had the key.
But at one time, he followed you and went from house to house.
He followed me to my apartment. I eventually had to rent an apartment on my own because he was going after my parents. He was going after my best friend. And so I rented this little tiny apartment, and he followed me home from work. And so he found out where I lived.
Did you report it to the police?
Well, I did. He was pounding on my door at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I called the police, and then I called Mark James, who was a college friend who was on the radio. And Mark was just getting off, and you know, there was no 911 then. And they didn't say, oh, stay on the phone with us. And so Mark said, call the police back and tell them that you have to stay on the phone with them, and I'll be there. In the meantime, the police got there, and the policeman, which was the law, said, you're a married woman. You have no right to rent an apartment. You're chattel. You belong to him.
He used that phrase.
He used the word chattel, and to hear yourself called chattel, it just was like, oh my God.
Furniture, you're a possession.
I'm a possession.
Does this sound familiar to you, Connie?
It does. It's very similar. And one of the things that happens in shelter, when in programs, in groups, when women come together and they talk about their experiences, is they find out that what happened to Carole is the same thing that happened to me, that happened to this person, happened to that person. Everybody in the room shares those stories, and it's like, you know, I don't know how many times I've heard, what, do they have a script? You know,
but even now in 2012, and not just those years ago when Carole was married to this brute.
The behavior of the abusers has not changed. Now, the response of law enforcement, thankfully, has changed. There's been a huge amount of education.
Well, it must not be a problem any longer, because Sojourner Center just had $500,000 taken away from the budget. So obviously, somebody in a position of authority felt the problem had been solved.
Well, I think that there was that was kind of an unintended consequence of some reallocation that the community that they did at the state level, and unfortunately the result was we lost $500,000, which meant we had to close 80 beds. So we have shrunk in size now, and not because there's not need. There is still continues to be need. We are still receiving 150 to 250 women and children calling every month.
So you lost 80 beds, but you were full then.
We were full then, and now we are turning away more women and children. And they may be getting into shelter at other organizations around town, but we don't know that. We just know that we're not able to serve them.
We don't hear a whole lot about empty shelters.
No, no, and the use of the overflow program has increased tremendously over the last year. So
where are you going to make up the money, Connie?
The community. We're looking to the community. We're hoping that.
Just a second, hold on. Folks, that's you. Will you please pay attention now, especially to this next part? Because if you say, oh, it's another person who's asking me for money, just know you heard just one example of how many in the valley, in the state. How many abused women are there?
1 in 4 women is a victim of domestic violence in her lifetime. 1 in 4. So that's, it's hundreds and thousands of women. This is the most prevalent issue that our law enforcement responds to, the most prevalent issue that arrives in hospital emergency rooms. This is the most prevalent issue that creates long-standing problems for children. This is the issue we must address if we want to solve a lot of other issues.
Okay, tell everybody how they can help. Obviously, they can sign a check,
right?
But talk to them about why the check should be at Sojourner Center.
Sojourner Center does 3 things: safety, empowerment, and self-sufficiency or transformation. And we need people's support, and they're coming together now to say that we will provide. See, women can't leave if they don't have 2 things: a place to go, a safe place to go, and as Carole demonstrated, just renting an apartment, it may not be safe.
And you didn't go to Sojourner Center, why?
There was no Sojourner Center then, and that's what frightens me. That's why, you know, as long as we've known each other, you didn't know this about me, but I feel it's so important to come out because I don't want to go back to 1973 when there is no place to go, and so the women stay with their abusers, or they go to friends or family, and the abuser comes after the friends and family.
And law enforcement doesn't behave that way. In fact, law enforcement is not only so dramatically different now in the treatment of these victims, they're right now very, very involved with Sojourner Center.
They are. The Phoenix Law Enforcement Association has been a supporter for a long time. The City of Phoenix has implemented a new protocol where they're trying to identify the most coercive abusers, because they know that's where misdemeanor to murder happens with very little warning. The City of Mesa has done a lot of work, the City of Glendale. There's lots of departments that are doing a lot of work, but the reality is that most of the time beating on your door at 2 a.m. is a misdemeanor. It's disturbing the peace. It's not going to land somebody in jail. And the predictors of violence and of murder are so high if it's domestic violence. And so we've got to create a safe place for women to go. We've got to have support when she gets there, because moving away from domestic violence, away from that relationship, is going to take time.
You had a premiere of a film just last week or a couple of weeks ago, and the film obviously must still be available to groups.
The film we showed was Telling Amy's Story, and it is available. You can look it up online, and it goes back and dissects a murder that occurred in Pennsylvania and all the places where there could have been intervention.
How do they find it?
Pardon?
How do they find the film? Online?
Yeah, go online. It was put out by the Pennsylvania Broadcasting Corporation.
What about the title again?
Telling Amy's Story.
Well, that might do it too.
Yes, and they can contact us. Just give us.
Well, that wouldn't be a bad idea.
Just contact
anyway,
us.
Right?
We'll get you that information.
Find out about the services available to Sojourner
and come down
Center.
and learn more about what we're doing. We actually do tours.
Carole Bartholomeaux.
Yes,
You're not
sir.
only a friend, but you're a very courageous lady. You made an impact today. I thank you so much. And Connie, as always, thanks for just being there, okay? We hope that you get all that money made up. And of course, that will be completely up to you, won't it? Because you found out about the Sojourner Center and all the good things that it does on this, the Morning Scramble.